bed's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away. Oh.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Terror Obscura, the show where we look at the best and worst horror has to offer. I'm your host, The Fear Fan, and thanks for tuning in. You know, sequels are funny things. Every once in a while, you get one that blows you away, one that reminds you of why you love the original while taking familiar characters in new directions and building on the original mythology. This is not one of those sequels. Ah yes, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Released 1 year after Dream Warriors, the Dream Master promised the return of everybody's favorite boogeyman to the big screen. By now, Freddy was becoming bigger than ever, and after the excellence of Part 3, fan expectations were at an all-time high. And what better way to meet those expectations than by filming during a writer's strike with a partially completed script directed by a Finnish director who had yet to make a single film in the US. Well, who knows, there have been less likely success stories, so let's give this one a fair shake. So, without further ado, let's dive into A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Like the last movie, this one starts out with a little arts and crafts session. This time, it's chalk rather than paper mache, and as the little girl finishes, a teenage girl walks up and, because she's an idiot, walks right into the spookiest damn house she can find. And what is this Mensa candidate's name, you ask? That's weird. The heroine of the last movie was named Kristen too, but she was played by Patricia Arquette and... Wait a second, you just swapped out actresses on me, didn't you? Anyway, Kristen 2.0 goes wandering around the boiler room, and eventually she freaks out enough to call in Joey and Kincaid, who are thankfully played by the same actors from Part 3. Thank God. For a second there I was expecting Samuel L. Jackson and John Leguizamo. Anyway, they're understandably pissed off that she keeps dragging them back here, and the next morning we learn that Kristen's got a whole new group of friends, including Alice, a shy and introverted girl, and Alice's brother Rick, who Kristen is currently dating. We also get to meet their father. Judging by the parents in the last few movies, this guy ought to be a real charmer.
How are you, Mr. Johnson?
My God, is every single parent in Springwood this shitty? Why bother burning Freddy to death in the first place? If this is how you treat your kids, you might as well just let the pedophiliac child murderer run free. So Kristen gets to school and we meet her other friends. There's Sheila, who's black, nerdy, and has asthma, and Debbie, who's a bit of a fitness freak and is afraid of bugs. We also get to meet Dan Jordan, who Alice has a crush on. Later on, when Alice goes to her locker, Joey and Kincaid tell her to knock off messing with the dream world. They're concerned that her screwing around with Freddy's place will stir him back up, and manage to get in the last word before Rick shows up to escort her off. Oh, great. Somebody call the janitor. It looks like Billy opened up a hellgate in his locker again. Later that night, Kincaid falls asleep and finds himself in the auto graveyard where Freddy was buried. His dog's there too, and, well, I think it's better if I just let this part speak for itself.
Jason?
Dude, you either need to get that dog checked for gonorrhea or at least stop feeding him jalapenos before bed. Anyway, that is some powerful piss, and it actually proves strong enough to return Freddy from the afterlife. That's right, he's back and he's pissed. Literally. So he follows Kincaid into the junk maze, but Kincaid has managed to set a trap for him and drops a Buick on his extra crispy ass. Hey, dude, we're only 20 minutes in, and you're the only black survivor from the last movie. Something tells me this isn't going to end well for you. Sure enough, after a brief chase through the cars, Freddy returns and does away with Kincaid. Quick, doggy, pee on the corpse so that he might live again! Unfortunately, it looks like the doggy doesn't have to go again, and because we need to hurry up and get rid of the old cast so we can focus on the new group of expendables, we cut to Joey in his bedroom. And since this is Joey we're talking about, I think we all know what that means. Joey Dream Powers, activate!
How's this for a wet dream?
He died as he lived. Horny. Anyway, now that we don't have to worry about the original cast anymore, it's time for a heartwarming moment between Rick and Alice as he tries to teach her the ancient art of suck fu.
Like that. You see, it's all in the mind. You see yourself doing something and your body reacts and does it. Like so. Like that.
Rick, you do realize that if this is the best that your mind can produce, it doesn't say much about your mental capacity. Who knows? Maybe Alice can do better. Guess not. Anyway, the next morning, Joey's mom comes in to clean his bed sheets. Now there's a scary thought. And instead finds Joey's body.
Joey.
Wow, it's like a ship in a bottle. Did Freddy put the corpse back together inside the bed? Or did he reconstruct the bed around the corpse? The world may never know. So the next morning, Kristen sees that Kincaid and Joey aren't at school and, realizing what probably happened, promptly freaks and manages to knock herself right the hell out. Fortunately, the school has a crack medical staff led by, Robert Englund in drag.
Feeling better now?
Let me assure you, anyone who wakes up to see a cross-dressing Robert Englund standing over them is pretty damn far from being alright. Anyway, as anybody could probably guess at this point, it's Freddy, and after being woken up by the real nurse, who isn't that much of an improvement over Nurse Englund, she gathers up her friends to tell them the story of Freddy Krueger. Exposition, ho!
Fred Krueger, he's a town legend. He was a child killer freed on a technicality.
So?
So, a lot of parents got pissed off. And, according to Chris, they hunted him down and roasted him like a Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that movie, but here's a hint. See that big 4 at the end of the title? I'm pretty sure everybody in the audience already gets this. Anyway, before we can move into full-on Last Time on a Nightmare on Elm Street territory, Kristen's mom shows up.
Kristen, get the hell away from that house! On delay! On delay! On delay!
Hooray! I guess one neglectful alcoholic wasn't enough to fill this movie's crappy parent quota. And as if to prove that she's learned nothing from the fact that every other child on the block has died in their sleep, she promptly doses Kristen with some sedative. Kristen tries to dream someplace nice, and actually seems to succeed at first. But, just when you thought it was safe to go back to sleep... Anyway, Kristen tries to run, but gets stuck in some quicksand. But it's apparently not quick enough for Freddy, who just goes ahead and pushes her under. What, no one-liner? Come on, Freddy, you can do better than that. Give it another shot. You're sunk, bitch. Anyway, Krueger isn't done with Kristen yet, and stalks her into the boiler room. There, he reveals that she's the last of the Elm Street children, and tries to coax her into bringing somebody else in. Alright, I think it's time for a little role-playing here. You are the last surviving victim of a supernatural killer who has claimed the lives of dozens of kids. That killer corners you and actively encourages you to drag someone else into this, even though they would be safe otherwise. Do you A, suck it up, face your death, and die knowing that at least your killer won't ever be able to harm anyone else ever again, or B, do exactly what the psychopath says? Dumbass. Give up? Well, here's Kristen's answer. Damn, should have gone with A. Well, at least she can die knowing that Alice doesn't have the power to pull people into her dreams, so at least she'll be the last.
You need my power!
Seriously, Kristen? You're like the worst protagonist ever! Anyway, since Alice is obviously more concerned with Kristen's safety than Kristen was for hers, she heads to Kristen's house only to find her extra crispy. The next day, Alice is relieved to find that no one else dreamed about Freddy, but disturbed to find that she seems to have picked up some of Kristen's personality quirks.
I don't smoke.
And if that's the case, then where did I get the cigarette from? So during class, Alice and Sheila both fall asleep, only to find that the curriculum is a little different. Okay, that's pretty messed up, but it's not like somebody's painted a target around her. Dead girl walking.
Wanna suck the face?
No.
You flunked.
Anyway, it looks like Alice is a little bit brighter than Kristen at least, because she immediately realizes that Freddy is using her to get to the others. She tries to stay awake by working double shifts at the diner, but eventually passes out during a lecture. Since Rick happens to be asleep in the can at the time, this can only mean one thing. Look out, Rick, it's...
Death! By Snoo Snoo!
Okay, not really. What we get instead is probably the lamest, most half-assed death scene in the entire series, as Rick fights an invisible Freddy Krueger. That, or he's trying to swat an irritating fly. Either way, it ends about as well as you would expect, and the next day at Rick's funeral, the others finally admit that Freddy might be real, and decide to form a plan. Wow, and it only took the deaths of 5 of your friends to figure out that something out of the ordinary was happening. Hope you've got that football scholarship lined up, Dan. Although, maybe I'm not giving Dan enough credit, since he is the first one in the movie to notice that Alice has started taking on personality traits from their dead friends. Later on, Alice makes a similar discovery when she learns that she now not only has her brother's mad martial arts skills, but also the ability to turn into an unconvincing stunt double when seen from behind. Great, next thing you know they'll be swapping out Alice's actress in the middle of the movie. Anyway, Alice's dad suddenly gives a shit about her and tries to keep her at home, but she sneaks out and finds that nobody's waiting where they agreed to meet. To pass the time, she heads to the theater where they're playing some old-timey public domain movie that, quite frankly, sucks. Okay, it doesn't suck that bad. So Alice finds herself back in the diner, where Freddy stops in for a quick bite to eat.
I love soul food. Bring me more. Your shift is over.
Well, it looks like she's obviously inherited Kristen's talent for selling out her friends at the drop of a hat. Also, you just know that that soul is going straight to Freddy's thighs. So Alice makes it to the diner for real, and together she and Dan head for Deb's house, where Deb is apparently dreaming about lifting some weights in her basement. Behold the rich inner lives of our protagonists. Anyway, Freddy shows up, and what follows is undeniably the film's best kill. While Alice and Dan realize that they're both still asleep and that Krueger is just delaying them by putting them in an infinite loop, Debbie finds that she is slowly and painfully turning into a giant cockroach. Looks like somebody fell asleep reading Kafka. And yes, that is a literary reference. I can read. Anyway, after Deb buys it, Freddy tricks Alice and Dan into crashing the truck that they were apparently sleep driving. Although Alice isn't hurt, Dan's pretty messed up, and they take him to the hospital. Alice has 15 minutes to get ready before they put Dan under, and that's not much time for her to get ready. Okay, her boyfriend's in danger, she's got only 15 minutes to save him, and it's the 80s. Only one thing to do. It's montage time, bitches!
You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down.
Anyway, Alice manages to protect Dan from Freddy for a while, but in the end, he's pulled out of the dream when something goes wrong with his surgery, forcing the doctors to bring him around. Although she's managed to save Dan, Alice is trapped in the dream with Freddy. Alright, it's time for the final confrontation. How does this one stack up? Well, all in all, it's not bad. Alice hasn't just been absorbing her friends' personalities, but has actually been getting their dream powers as well, including Alice's agility and Rick's karate. Sigh. She even manages to shoot him with the shitty green screen effect, which he promptly laughs off. Anyway, he's about to finish her off when she's struck by sudden inspiration and shows him his own reflection, which somehow gives the souls he's consumed the strength to break free. And as for how she knew to do this, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that it's because she read the script. So, with Krueger defeated, we cut to a few weeks later, where we see that Alice and Dan are now an item, and that Alice still sometimes thinks that Krueger might still be around. Our next sequel, Justly Assured, we fade to black as a forgettable 80s tune plays in the background. And that's A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And while it isn't the worst this series has to offer, it isn't the best either. While I love the first three movies, this is the first entry that doesn't really suck me in, and for the most part I blame that on the lack of a finished script. That said, I think the movie's real saving grace is the visual flair of director Renny Harlin. As for the movie's kills, they're a bit of a mixed bag. Counting Freddy's death, you get 2 excellent death scenes, 2 that are par for the course, 1 that's meh at best, and 1 that ranks among the worst in the series. Despite the film's problems, it went on to become the series' highest-grossing film at the time, and to this day it remains in the number 2 slot. Renny Harlin would go on to direct a pretty good sequel to Die Hard, a film called Deep Blue Sea that we'll probably wind up discussing here in the future, and a film called Cutthroat Island that bombed so hard that it managed to kill an entire movie studio. As for Freddy, he'd be back less than a year later in A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. And speaking of things that come next in a series, you may be wondering what we'll be watching next time here on Terra Obscura. The truth is, I don't know, because I'm letting the fans decide. So, tune in next time because, hey, you guys picked it. Till then, this is the Fear Fan signing out.
Try to be best, cause you're only a man.